You sleep 8 hours and wake up heavier than when you went to bed. You spend an entire Sunday doing nothing. You ignore the messages, you skip the gym, you tell yourself this is the day your body will finally catch up. Monday morning, the alarm goes off and the exhaustion is already waiting for you, sitting at the edge of the mattress like it never left. That's the strange thing nobody really explains. Rest stopped working, and the more you stack on top of it, the deeper the tiredness seems to dig. There's a particular kind of confusion that comes with this, because the blood work is fine. The doctor shrugs. The friend who means well says you should drink more water and go to bed earlier, as if you haven't tried that already. You start to suspect your body is broken in some private way that medicine can't see. You start to wonder if you're just lazy or weak, or somehow incapable of doing the basic human thing of being awake without dragging yourself through every hour. And underneath all of that, there's a quieter fear, the one you don't say out loud, that maybe this is just who you are now. Tired forever. Pause on that for a second, because it isn't true. The exhaustion you carry isn't a flaw in your character. It isn't a sign that your body is failing. It's a signal that you're trying to recover from something using a tool that was never built for the job. You keep applying physical rest to a fatigue that doesn't live in the muscles. You keep closing your eyes against an exhaustion that doesn't sleep. And there's a reason this idea isn't strange or new. Centuries ago, a culture that watched its workers collapse from overwork started naming the kinds of tiredness that bed rest can't touch. Japan didn't invent fatigue, but Japan was one of the first societies to look at it carefully enough to notice that it has more than one shape, and once you see that, the entire problem rearranges itself. If this is the kind of thing you want to keep hearing, subscribe to the channel. New videos every week. Now look at what's actually going on inside you. The body has two completely different recovery systems, and they answer to two completely different forms of tiredness. The first is the system you already know. Your muscles run out of glycogen, your heart has been pumping, your legs ache, your back is stiff. You lie down, you sleep, the body refills its tanks. That fatigue dissolves on contact with rest. It's the kind of tiredness a Saturday morning can fix, the kind a long shower softens, the kind your grandparents understood when they came in from the field. But there's a second system, and this is the one almost no one talks about. It's the recovery your nervous system needs after carrying decisions, emotions, vigilance, social performance, low-level fear, ambient noise, micro-conflicts, identity management, future planning, regret loops, and the constant work of keeping yourself together in a world that doesn't slow down. That kind of activity doesn't drain your muscles. It drains a network of structures in your brain that includes the prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate, the amygdala, and the default mode network. And these structures don't refill the way muscles do. You can be physically still and biologically depleted at the same time. This is where most people get stuck. You feel tired, so you stop moving. You lie on the couch. You open the phone. You scroll through videos that argue with each other. You read messages from people who want something from you. You watch a series with a plot that requires emotional tracking. You check the news, which puts you on alert. To your body, this looks like rest because you're horizontal. To your nervous system, this looks like another shift at work. The same network that drained during the week stays online during the weekend, just with different inputs. So you wake up Monday and the gauge is somehow lower than it was Friday. Because the gauge was never being filled, it was being slowly tapped from a different angle. And here is where it gets worth pausing, because once you understand which kind of fatigue you're actually carrying, the whole conversation about rest changes. The Japanese have a word for the tiredness that doesn't live in the body. They call it kokoro no tsukare. Kokoro doesn't translate cleanly. It points at the place where mind, heart, and spirit overlap, the part of you that registers meaning and weight. Tsukare means fatigue. Put them together and you have a phrase that names something English never quite did. The fatigue of carrying, not of doing, but of holding. The exhaustion of a person who hasn't lifted anything heavy and is still, somehow, depleted. It's what you feel after a long conversation that required you to be careful. It's what builds in the chest after a week of small decisions that all mattered a little. It's the residue of being a self in public for too many hours in a row. And the reason Japan named it is not poetic, it's medical. By the late 20th century, hospitals were treating workers who collapsed at desks while perfectly healthy by every blood marker available. Karoshi, death by overwork, forced researchers to admit that the human system had a way of running itself empty that had nothing to do with running out of sleep. The body was rested, the kokoro was not. Imagine a Wednesday afternoon when nothing dramatic has happened. You've been at the screen since morning, you've answered some messages, you've sat in a couple of meetings, you've made small choices about wording in emails. Nothing was hard, nothing was even particularly stressful, and yet by 4 in the afternoon, you can feel your eyes glaze over, your shoulders settle into a slump, your tolerance for the smallest interruption drop to nothing. You haven't earned this exhaustion in any obvious way. But you've been holding the kokoro online for 7 hours straight, and that account doesn't refill while you're still logged in. This is the fatigue that Be Dressed leaves untouched. Closing your eyes doesn't help because your eyes weren't the problem. Sleeping doesn't help because the issue isn't sleep deprivation, it's saturation of attention. And here is the harder truth. If you treat kokoro no tsukare with body rest, the body gets restless and you start to feel guilty for being tired because by every measure you should be fine. That guilt then loops back into the exact circuit that was already overloaded. You're now exhausting the very system you were trying to relieve. Notice what happens next, because this is where the modern problem gets cruel. You feel that depletion, and your hand reaches for the phone. The phone hands you a stream of content engineered to be interesting. And here is where you meet the second concept, the one neuroscience has been mapping for the last 20 years. Your brain has a network that turns on the moment you stop directing your attention outward. Researchers call it the default mode network. It's the system that processes meaning, autobiographical memory, social inference, future simulation, and identity work. It's what runs when you're staring out a window doing nothing, and it is essential. The default mode is how the brain digests experience. It's where the day's events get sorted, where emotions get integrated, where your sense of self is quietly reassembled. Without it, you don't get tired in a normal way. You get fragmented. The catch is this. The default mode only runs when nothing is grabbing your attention. The second a screen appears in front of your eyes, the network shuts down and a different system takes over. The task-positive network, the one designed for active focus. Every time you reach for the phone in a moment of fatigue, you're not resting. You're switching the brain from a recovery mode it desperately needs into a consumption mode that costs more energy. The reason you can scroll for 2 hours and feel emptier afterward is not in your imagination. You spent 2 hours blocking your own digestion. You stopped your brain from doing the silent work that would have actually restored the kokoro. Picture this in a normal day. You finish dinner, you sit on the couch, you open the phone. Within 4 minutes, you've watched 3 short videos, glanced at someone else's vacation, read half an argument in the comments, and felt a tiny spike of something each time. Your body is still. Your nervous system is in a low-grade workout. The default mode is offline. By the time you go to bed an hour later, the day has not been processed. It's still piled up inside you. So you sleep, and the brain tries to do, during sleep, what it should have done in stillness. It overruns into your dreams, which become anxious or chaotic, and you wake up feeling like you didn't actually rest, which is correct. The stillness you needed never happened. Your eyes were closed, but your attention had been hijacked all evening. Repair the picture, and a possibility opens. Recovery isn't only about sleep hours. It's about whether the default mode ever got time to run. A short walk without earbuds. The 5 minutes of staring at the ceiling before bed instead of checking notifications. The long shower where you just feel the water. The meal eaten without a second screen. These look like nothing from the outside. From the inside, they're the hours of actual restoration. And from this, you can already see why the prescription of more rest doesn't fix you. The issue was never the amount of rest, it was the kind. Move now to a third layer, because there's a quieter mechanism running underneath all of this. Your stress system was designed for short, intense, occasional events. A predator appears, the body floods with cortisol, you run, the threat passes, the system resets. The whole arrangement is built around a sharp on and a clean off. The problem is that the modern day doesn't give the body any clean offs. There's no predator and no all-clear signal. There's a low-grade hum of obligation that starts when you check the phone in bed and continues until you put it down at night. Researchers call the cost of that hum allostatic load. It's the wear and tear that builds up when your stress system is mildly activated for too long without ever fully discharging. Allostatic load is sneaky because at any given moment it doesn't feel like stress. It feels like normal life. You're not panicking, you're not crying, you're not in fight or flight. You're just slightly braced. The shoulders are slightly up. The jaw is slightly clenched. The breath is slightly shallow. The mind is slightly forward, already in the next task before you finish this one. None of these by itself is dramatic. Stack them across months, and the body starts behaving as if it lives in a low war zone. Cortisol stays elevated, sleep architecture flattens, inflammation creeps up, hunger and fullness signals get muddy. And the fatigue you feel in the morning is the body trying to tell you it can't keep paying interest on a debt that never gets paid down. Sense the difference between this kind of fatigue and a normal tired. A tired body wants sleep and gets fixed by sleep. An allostatic body wants the alarm to actually turn off, and sleep doesn't turn it off. You can sleep 9 hours under low-level threat and wake up exactly where you started. The body didn't recover, it just paused. And then the day starts again, and the dial goes back up before you've even had coffee. This is why people who go on vacation often need 3 or 4 days before they actually feel anything change. That's how long the system takes to register that the alarm is off. If your vacation is shorter than that, or if you spend it half checking work, the dial never drops and you come back tired from your rest. Not because rest doesn't work, because rest never began. Here's where the Japanese answer becomes practical. There is a word in Japanese, yutori, that doesn't translate cleanly either. It means something like spaciousness, looseness, the room a thing has to breathe inside. A schedule has yutori when there are gaps between obligations. A piece of fabric has yutori when it isn't pulled tight. A relationship has yutori when there's silence in it that doesn't feel awkward. Yutori isn't doing nothing. It isn't laziness. It's the deliberate construction of empty space inside an otherwise full life, because the empty space is what allows everything else to function. Without yutori, the kokoro can't reset. Without yutori, the default mode never runs. Without yutori, the allostatic dial never drops. And this is the move most people miss. They treat empty time as time to fill. They feel a free hour and they reach for content, errands, productivity, side projects. They confuse activity with living. Yutori asks for the opposite reflex. It asks you to leave the hour empty on purpose, to walk without a goal, to sit on a porch without a phone, to wait for a friend without scrolling, to drink coffee with nothing else happening. That looks small. It is not small. It is the only condition under which the deep recovery systems come online. You do not get them by lying down harder. You get them by leaving the room of your attention quiet enough that your nervous system trusts it can stand down. Picture a small example. You finish work and you have an hour before dinner. The reflex is to fill it. Maybe a quick errand, maybe a workout, maybe an episode, maybe a 30-minute scroll. Yutori would ask you, just for that hour, to go outside without your phone and walk slowly through your own neighborhood. No earbuds, no destination, no pace. You let the eyes do what they do when nothing demands them. You notice a tree you've passed for years and never actually looked at. You feel your shoulders drop somewhere in the second block. You think a thought you've been avoiding all day, and it doesn't kill you to think it. By the time you get home, your dinner is calmer, your sleep is deeper, and you can't quite explain why. The why is that for 40 minutes, your kokoro was finally allowed to be tired in peace without having to perform anything. Sit with one more piece, because there's a final distinction the Japanese make that English keeps blurring. There's a word, kyusoku, that means rest in the sense of stopping. You stop working, you stop moving, you sit. And there's another word, Kyuyo, that means rest in the sense of restoring. You actively do what fills you back up. The two are not the same. Kyusoku is what happens when you collapse on the couch. Kyuyo is what happens when you put yourself in front of something that genuinely refuels you. Sometimes that's stillness. Sometimes it's a slow walk. Sometimes it's a real conversation with one person who knows you. Sometimes it's cooking without rushing. Sometimes it's a long shower. The exact form changes per person. The principle does not. If you only ever do Kyusoku and never Kyuyo, you can rest your whole life and stay empty. Most modern fatigue is the result of confusing those two. You believe you're recovering when you're only stopping. The stopping was necessary, but it isn't enough. You need to add the second motion, the active filling, and you need to design your week around making sure that motion happens, even if it looks unproductive from the outside, even if it would never show up on a calendar as a real appointment. Hold all of this together for a moment, because the picture changes when the pieces line up. You're tired because there's a kind of fatigue that lives in the kokoro and not in the muscles, and your culture taught you to treat all fatigue as physical. You're tired because the network in your brain that processes meaning gets shut off every time you reach for a screen, so the day never gets digested. You're tired because the alarm system in your body is mildly on every hour you're awake, and it never gets the all clear long enough to discharge what it's been holding. You're tired because your idea of rest is stopping, when what your system actually needs is yutori, the deliberate empty space, and kyuyo, the active refilling, and you've been doing neither, while convincing yourself you've been resting plenty. Once that map is in front of you, the conclusion is almost gentle. You are not lazy. Your body is not broken. You are not the one human who can't be repaired by a weekend off. You're a person whose recovery is being measured with the wrong instrument. The instrument has been telling you that hours in bed equal restoration, when the truth is that restoration depends on what your attention is doing during those hours and what your nervous system is allowed to do between them. The fatigue you've been carrying is real, and it has a structure, and the structure has been understood by people who watched their own society collapse from this exact problem and decided to name it carefully. The thing they understood, that you can also understand starting tonight, is this: sleep is not enough on its own. The body is only one floor of the building. The kokoro lives upstairs, and that floor needs different kinds of light. If any of this rearranged something for you, send it to the friend you keep telling to slow down, the one who looks tired in every photo and laughs it off. They probably need to hear it from someone who isn't them. The next video goes deeper into how to build small pockets of yutori inside a week that already feels too full, without quitting your job and without moving to a mountain. For now, just notice this. The exhaustion you've been fighting was never asking you for more sleep. It was asking you to come back into a room that you and the world had forgotten how to leave quiet. You're allowed to come back.